Hello and welcome. I am Captain Tom, and you are on board the Silverwind, and we are joined by our co-host and intergalactic robot friend Wilson. So, thank you guys for being here on board. Just some guy, Lionel, Lisa. What do we have here? There's a lot of theories about Wilson right now. Let's see. Wilson from Tom Hanks movie. Okay, all right. Hashtag free my boy Wilson. Wilson is as free as any robot can be, right? It's the freedom of speech is a human right, and so I remind Wilson that every single day, which is why you will not be hearing from him. And speaking of which, we are going to be going to basically right here, just a little bit further away, the Milky Way galaxy. We're technically in it right now, so I guess we're going to be going out of it so we can have the Milky Way galaxy as a background for today's story, which is going to be Genesis chapter 19 with Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is a big story in the Bible, definitely one with a lot of emotions tied to it and a lot of myths or misunderstandings about the story. So hopefully hoping to basically dispel those things and just kind of give you what the story is in the Bible and kind of what's going on with there with some kind of surrounding context and things like that. So with that, let's go ahead and find, let's see here, the right thing here to get us out of here. Let's see. This should work. All right, Wilson, let's go to where we plan to go. So with that, let's see here. All right, we are moving. Perfect. Let's see. Yeah. We can kind of bounce between these two, right? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so it's going to take a second to warp drive over there. So last week we basically went to a galaxy that was kind of nearby and just talked a little bit about how, the things that we're starting to discover in space, we're starting to find some galaxies that are really far away, and fully formed galaxies that exist are, according to the materialist explanation, the billions of years theory, that these things would have to have been from these galaxies we're finding from close to the Big Bang, right? Like 400 million years from the Big Bang, yet we're finding fully formed galaxies that far out, which is pretty crazy. Definitely not what they would expect. This right here is our Milky Way galaxy. I want to make sure, I probably should have made sure we were good right here. Let's see, lock us into place so we don't want to drift around here. Space can be pretty crazy sometimes. Let's see. All right, I think we're good. All right, perfect. So I want to talk a little bit more about galaxies today, and next week we'll probably go back to checking out some moons and planets and that sort of thing, because there's definitely a lot more for us to cover in that department. But today I just want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing right here. So basically you're seeing lots and lots of stars and a supermassive black hole in the middle of all that, which is what's kind of tying everything together, and this big old spiral galaxy. And we're actually on, I don't know which arm here, but Wilson, do you know? Wilson's not paying attention to me right now. So it's going to be on kind of one of the outer arms of this spiral right here. So we definitely don't want to be near the center of the galaxy. It's not going to be a very hospitable place. But that's basically a ton of stars caught in one location. Interesting thing. So one of the things that it's spinning, right? It's actually spinning very, very quickly. And one of the things that we understand in physics, basically, is that when something is spinning around, it's trying to be basically pulled apart. I mean, you can probably imagine, if you're on one of those merry-go-rounds or that sort of thing on a playground. I don't know if they have those on playgrounds anymore, but when I was a kid, they still had them. You could basically spin this thing that was on the playground, and you try to hold on to it. And if you were on the edges of it, it really felt like you were trying to get thrown off of it. And if someone is able to spin it fast enough, you get flung off the thing, and it was a lot of fun, or you got an injury, which is probably why you don't see them too often anymore. But so they got some force that tries to throw something apart the faster that it spins. Now, one of the interesting things about our galaxy, and this is true for not all galaxies, but a lot of them out there, is that it's spinning so fast there actually isn't enough mass in our galaxy that we can see right here that should give us enough gravity to hold the whole thing together. As a matter of fact, this problem is so severe. Let's see here. I think I have the closing here. There we go. Let's switch right here. Let's see. So actually, before I go over to that picture right there, let me introduce it. So the best way to try and explain how the galaxy is not flying apart from a materialist perspective is to say, well, there must be more mass and matter here than what we can see with our own eyes. And the calculation is so severe, they calculate there has to be basically 95% of this that we can't see that's mass, to give it enough gravity to keep it together so it doesn't spin itself apart. Because as we can see, it's not spinning itself apart, but there's not enough mass to hold it together. So the theory that was created was about dark matter, and that's this idea that there's matter that's incredibly dense. There's a lot of it. Basically 95% of this is dark matter, and it's completely invisible. None of our instruments can detect it, and we haven't found any of it on Earth or in our solar system, but apparently it's about 95% of what you're looking at here, supposedly, is dark matter that you can't see. Invisible stuff that happens to be holding our universe together. And that's basically the best materialist explanation that they can give for this. And yeah, so there's a lot of theories revolving around dark matter. Dark energy is a little bit different. That's the residual energy after the Big Bang, and that's a theory about that. But yeah, it's once again, if you have a materialist perspective, this is the only choice you really have. Now, this is one of those things that is, it can be stated as being reasonable, but not necessarily logical. And what I mean by that is that you have plenty of reason to state, okay, well, if the world is just matter, the only thing that exists is matter that we can see, or physical matter in the universe, then there has to be a lot of physical matter here that's completely invisible. Right? And okay, so there's some reasoning for that, because otherwise the galaxy would be spinning apart and would be held together. So the reason it's not logical is because there's also another point of view that is also reasonable. And when something's logical, that basically means there's only one reasonable conclusion that could be made about something, right? So one thing leads directly into another thing. And of course, that counter argument would be the theological argument that the only thing that exists is not just matter, but there's actually something outside of matter, time and space, that created things and had the force to create matter out of nothing, which is what we would call God, or the spiritual reality. So let's go ahead and change this view real quick. Perfect. So I want to read a verse to you guys that's actually pretty interesting on this subject. So this is going to be, if you have your Bibles and you want to look this up, this is going to be in Colossians 1 verse 17. And it says this, and this is referring to Jesus, by the way. He existed before all things, and in him all things hold together. So what we can visibly see in the universe is we could see entire galaxies being held together by an invisible force. Ironically, you can actually look at an atom, one of these, something on the other side of the size, right? Something incredibly small, and it's being held together by something called atomic glue. And atomic glue is basically this mysterious force that scientists don't know where it comes from, but it holds atoms together. There's no source for the energy for this. It's extremely mysterious, but it exists, and it's the thing that keeps all the atoms in the universe held together. And once again, being held together by a mysterious, invisible force. And so if we were taking the theological perspective here, we could say, okay, well, God clearly has some kind of invisible hand involved in creation, holding matter together, such as atoms through atomic glue, or things like what we think is dark matter, and really there isn't anything there, which is why you don't see anything there, is actually something outside of matter influencing it and holding it together. So those are two different reasonable ideas based on a worldview, and I'll leave you to decide which one you believe. But I just thought that would be kind of interesting to point out to you guys and talk about our galaxy a little bit. So let's see here. I think I'm missing some chats right here. All right, Dan Yoder, welcome. Just some guys, sounds like a bunch of hot air to me. Oh, talking about the let's see here, the Wilson stuff. Heck yeah. Let's see here. The materialistic view seems like it's 5% logical and 95% illogical. It can be very illogical at times. Like this would, of course, be dark matter is an illogical assumption, but it is a reasonable assumption, right? So it's kind of depends on which of those worldviews you can validate to decide which one is actually true. So let's see here. Even the materialists have to have faith in something. That's very true. In order to have their view, to me, it's not much different than a faith-based approach. Julian, howdy. Running some errands. Catch you later. All right. Well, we'll hopefully see you later then. All right. So let's see here. On your point, just some guy. Yeah. So this is a very, very good point. So basically, everyone has to put their faith in something, right? And to believe in dark matter is to have faith in something that you can't see, right? You believe it's there because you see what you think is the effects of it, but there are other explanations for what is causing these effects, right? And yeah, so everyone has faith in something, and some people say they don't have enough faith to be a materialist, and others say they don't have enough faith to believe in God. So one of those things you kind of have to wrestle with, and you know, we can have this kind of conversations here if you guys want. But with that, I think we should go ahead, turn this ship around, go to the reading room, and start our reading there. And I'm sure we'll have plenty more things to discuss, especially with Genesis chapter 19, which a lot of people think is a myth, but we'll kind of explore that a little bit and how valid this story really is, with kind of like modern archaeology and that sort of thing, and just kind of go from there. So with that, let's go ahead and let's find that transition. All right, I'll see you guys back aft. All right, so here we are. We're in the reading room. This is perfect. Let's go ahead and I mean, look at that view. You can't beat, well, I mean, I don't know. We've had a lot of beautiful views here, but it's hard to beat, you know, our own galaxy. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, let's go ahead and should probably have the reading stuff out. But let's go ahead to Genesis chapter 19. We're just going to start reading. A little bit of recap, though. So we just got done going over basically God himself showing up in the form, in the person of the Son of God, to basically have a meal with Abraham and to reconfirm in detail this promise that he made a few months prior, that Sarah would have a child, even though she's very old and there's no, like, you know, physical way that this could possibly work. This would obviously be a miracle, that she would be able to give birth to a child, and that God's promise, you know, to Abraham and his covenant with Abraham would be through that child that he has with Sarah. So they, you know, the child's name's gonna be Isaac, which means laughter, because both Abraham and Sarah laughed when God promised him this. And yeah, so it's pretty interesting. But then the meeting kind of turns a little bit. It turns the attention to Sodom, because the Lord is walking there. There's two other people there. We know those two other people are angels because of how they're introduced in this chapter. So you have the Lord, two angels. They're going towards Sodom to basically see for themselves the evil that basically is being, you know, there's a cry out of evil to the Lord. He's hearing it all. And so he's going to, very similar to how he did with the Tower of Babel, he's going to show up personally and become an eyewitness to this instead of just judging it from afar, which I think is very interesting. The personal nature of God, and both how he cares for us, such as with Hagar, and then also how he, you know, judges and deals with evil. So we're going to see him take a very personal approach with that here as well. Abraham is not quite sure of the nature and personality of God yet. To be fair, he doesn't have a Bible or anything to read about him, so he only knows what God has revealed. God hasn't revealed a lot up to this point, and so he's kind of concerned, like, Lord, are you going to destroy the city? Because he knows it's an evil place. Like, he's fully aware, he's lived near it. Are you going to destroy this place if there's like a number of righteous people there? Basically is the conversation. Are you going to lump the righteous in with the wicked? And of course, God keeps confirming to him, saying, absolutely not, I would never do that. And we know of at least one righteous person who's there, and that is Lot. And when I say righteous, let's just say that he is a righteous person, but not necessarily the wisest person. So there's kind of a difference with that. So he truly is trying to follow God and teach others the same thing. But we've seen him before when he's had a choice. Lot is a little bit, let's just say, what's the best word for it? I don't want to say impatient, but very quick to jump towards something that looks good on the outside, but not taking the time to examine it to fully understand what he's getting into. And this explains why he's living in an evil place called Sodom. So with that whole setup, we're going to go ahead and get into the story. Let's see here. I think there's some more chats right here. Let's see. Yeah, just some guy. Couldn't have said better myself. Absolutely. Perfect. So let's go ahead and I know that was an old message and it was about the galaxy stuff. So let's see here. Okay, let's get to a nice little view. Really like this middle view right here. It's pretty good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and read a few verses here. I want to make sure. All right, got my notes. We're going to read verse 1 through 3. Let's go ahead and do it. That evening, the two angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. When he welcomed them and bowed with his face to the ground, "My lords," he said, "come to my home to wash your feet and be my guests for the night. You may then get up early in the morning and be on your way again." "Oh no," they replied, "we'll just spend the night out here in the city square." But Lot insisted, so at last they went home with him. Lot prepared a feast for them and complete with fresh bread made without yeast, and they ate. All right, there we go. Okay, so so he's basically these two people are angels. These are the people that were with the Lord as they were basically spending time with Abraham in the previous chapter. So they finally made it to Sodom, and keep this in mind. It's not going to bring it up, so I'm just going to bring it up here. The Lord mentioned that he was also going to go to Sodom to witness everything for himself. So he's going to be present in the scene here, but he's not going to be actively, like, the story's not going to mention him in this chapter. But just know that the Lord, like the Son of God, is, in this scene somewhere observing everything that's happening, which isn't something typically people think about because they're not, connecting with the previous chapter. But that's where he said he's going to go so he could see it for himself. So interesting thing to keep in mind. And then there's also something else interesting here. Let me say again. Also something else interesting here. And that's this idea of, taking in guests. Now, today, we don't really do this, right? We don't wait outside. We don't go to the city gates. We don't really have city gates. And we don't actively look for people to invite into our homes, complete strangers, and give them food, give them a place to wash and rest and that sort of thing. For free, by the way. Like, this is not something we normally do today. And that's because the world's very different today. I mean, we can drive places. It's not as dangerous to travel in a modern era. Whereas back then, that wasn't the case. There weren't Motel 6s all over the place, or just hotels in general. There weren't, oftentimes really well kept up roads. There were plenty of bandits and dangers and troubles. Yet people did have reasons for traveling. Maybe it's religious reasons. Maybe they had to go to a family affair or event or something like that. And everyone at some point in time might need to travel in this dangerous world. And so it became a very common custom all over the world in the ancient world to basically take care of travelers, right? Because when you're a traveler, you're going to hope that there's going to be people when you go places that will provide you a place to stay and take care of you, right? And so you actively do that for others, and everyone kind of tries to take care of each other. It also helped promote travelers coming to your city because, if you have a merchant coming to your city and they're wealthy, or they bring in goods and things like that, you want it to be a welcoming place, somewhere that people will want to go to with those goods. So it's a big part and has actually been kind of seen as a sacred duty. And there are still places in the world today who still see it this way, that they have a guest in their home and it becomes a sacred duty to take care of that guest with all the best that you have to offer. And there's an interesting verse in the Bible that is on this, and that's going to be Hebrews 13, verse 2. So if you guys want to go there real quick, I'll read this. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. And I do believe that verse is kind of looking back to this story in the Bible. But at the same time, this is a sentiment in general that you are, in this case, like, hey, be welcoming to guests, because you never know. This might be an angel who is showing up to test you, and then just to see whether or not you're going to actually take care of a stranger, right? So Lot has basically hung out at the city gates. He's waiting for someone to show up, and this is also because Lot knows what this city is like. Lot understands the danger within this city. There are plenty of travelers who will come here, and yet it's a really bad place. It is not a safe place for travelers. And so Lot is trying to intercede and prevent more people from becoming victims to something that we're going to see here in a second. But as far as Lot knowing that these were angels at this moment, he probably didn't know that, right? Him referring to them as lords may have just been, seeing that they were well off, or just in general, just kind of praising them and saying like, hey, please come with me and stay with me for the night. That way you're safe. Let's see here. I think there's a notes there. So we'll go ahead and move forward. But before we move forward, I do want to say that if you have little ones, I would say this story is going to take a very sharp turn into the PG-13 rated kind of field, right? So this is where it stops being a G-rated story. And, I'm in order to tell the story accurately, I'm going to have to read what the Bible is actually saying here and talk about, the subject a little bit, because it's important to basically, expand on a little bit, how bad this place is. Like, for everyone who knows this story, we know that this is a place that God is going to judge. And that's not necessarily the bad part. The bad part is what the people in the city are doing that is causing that judgment. And it gets pretty, it gets pretty intense to talk about. So if you have little ones, I'm just letting you know, this is going to get PG-13 pretty quickly. So I just want to make sure that you have that heads up. We have to do that every once in a while in the Bible. There's some places in the Bible that go straight up rated R. So I will definitely do you a favor and give you a heads up on that beforehand. So I think we've talked about that enough, given you enough opportunity. So let's go ahead and read the next part. We're going to read verses 4 and 5 and see what exactly is going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. But before they retired for the night, all the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. They shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them." So let's break this down a little bit. So we got a verse in 2 Peter chapter 2, 7 through 8 that sheds a little bit of light on this story. Talks about Lot and talks about how Lot's heart was grieved because he was living in such an evil place. Now you might want to ask the question, why would Lot be living here? And that's because this is where Lot chose to live. I mean, he probably really enjoyed all of the benefits of the city, and it seems that he really enjoyed that city living. But at the same time, it's a really evil place, and it really grieved his spirit to stay there. So he was very fully aware of everything that's going on. And now let me see here. Let's get to the chats a little bit. So the angels traveled like we do. Yes, in this situation, the angels totally traveled like we do, and they were disguising themselves as humans for this part. And so, they were definitely testing the city by walking in, looking like a couple of people. They probably looked really impressive, but it seems that everyone involved, Lot and the townspeople, do recognize them just as human. And of course, that's not true. They're more than human. I'm all in, not looking back. Yeah, sounds like Dan. It sounds like you know the story. Okay, let's see here. So he was grieved by what's going on here, and I do want to let's see here. So this is more of a picture than just, these angels walk in and they see two guys holding hands and like, we got to burn this place down. The picture that's here is that you have men, young and old, which means that what they're doing here is accepted culturally, right? When you have both the old generation and the young generation united in this, that means that there's no real cultural conflict in the city over what they're doing. They're basically justifying, gratifying their own desires at the expense of other people, basically laying claim to the bodies of travelers to use them to their own sense of pleasure, which is a twisted sense of pleasure, right? So you have God's way of, doing things. And we see that as people get further and further away from God, in their pursuit, to chase something else, chase a delusion outside of what is true, what is in God, then we see them basically abandon everything that, God designed. So they're not only is it an unnatural expression of like a sexual appetite kind of thing, but it's mainly that they're trying to, they're trying to rape these guys, right? Like this is a really horrible thing for as a society that they're okay with, right? So this is very, very dark stuff. This probably led to a lot of murder, obviously, as well. And we have another place in the Bible, actually, it sheds a little bit more light on what it is that was going on here in Sodom and why God was very angry with them. And it's going to be in Ezekiel 16, and it's going to be 49 through 50. And I actually do have it over here. Let me see here. Oh, yeah. All right. We got it right here. So I'm going to read this. Ezekiel 16, 49 through 50. This is God talking, and he's saying this to Israel at the time. This is jumping a bit forward in the story. But Israel, during this period of time in Ezekiel, they're not following the Lord. And so God is going to compare them to Sodom, calling Sodom their sister. So it's just kind of a way of basically pointing out their sin and what they're doing. And this is what he says: look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride. She and her daughter, this was Sodom and Gomorrah. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, and abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me, literally before him. Like, keep in mind, the Son of God is standing somewhere nearby watching all this go down. Therefore I took them away as I saw fit. And that is what God said in Ezekiel. And let's go over that. So they had pride, fullness of food, right? They were idle, say idle hands are the devil's playground. They ignored the poor and the needy. So there were a lot of, and of course the haughty and committed abomination, right? Which is what they're doing in this moment right here. So basically these were, as far away from God as they could possibly be. So there's another verse in Matthew 6, 23, where Jesus talks about how the darkness, actually, you know what? Let's just go ahead and read it. That's probably the best way to talk about this, because this one I did not write down, but that shouldn't be too hard to find. So let's see here. This is talking about the darkness of the mind, basically, and basically kind of how sin works here. So let's go ahead and go to that. 6 verse 23. Let me read that for you guys. But when your eye is bad, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. So we've got basically what's being said here is that these people probably felt like the darkness that they had was a good thing. These people felt entitled to the bodies of these men who walked into town. I mean, just think about that. They had no shame or even any inclination that, hey, what I'm doing is wrong. Like, they felt justified in what they were demanding in this. And we're going to see that as we go through the story more. But yeah, so that's the state of this place. And so this is basically a prelude to what would happen in Canaan in general, right? And so this is what God does here is going to actually act as a warning to the entire area of Canaan. Hey, you guys need to stay away from this, or else, God's going to do something about it. So, yeah, we may be jumping too far right there. So let's go ahead and move a little bit forward here. Let's talk a little bit more about that demanding and see what it is that happens next. So we're going to go over 6 through 9. And yeah, let's see. Let's do this one. Perfect. All right, let's jump right into it. So Lot stepped outside to talk to them. That's pretty bold, by the way, shutting the door behind him. Please, my brothers, he begged, don't do such a wicked thing. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. But please leave these men alone, for they are my guests and are under my protection. Stand back, they shouted. This fellow came to town as an outsider, and now he's acting like our judge. We'll treat you far worse than those other men. And they lunged toward Lot to break down the door. All right, well, this situation's going south very quickly. So Lot steps out there. They clearly know this guy. He's been there for a while now, and he's trying to talk sense into them, trying to talk them down. But he's in a really bad situation. There's an entire mob of men outside of his door, and he can't fight them off, right? He really doesn't have a lot he can do to protect these 2 men that he brought into his home. Now, keep in mind what I said earlier. Protecting strangers that you have made guests into your home, protecting travelers, was a really big deal, and it was seen as something that was sacred, right? And he's definitely treating it that way in this situation. Now, the part where he basically says, listen, and he's doing this because it's the only card he can play. There's a bunch of, well, let's just say, lusty men out here, and they're trying to break in and take my guests and do a very evil thing to them. What's the only thing I could possibly do to try and stop this? And so the idea that he comes up with is to give them his virgin daughters. Now, this is some people, give Lot a bad rap for this. They say this is despicable. How dare Lot give up his daughters? He didn't value them, blah, blah, blah. Well, the reality is it's the opposite of that. It's not saying that he doesn't value them. It's saying that he's willing to give up everything that he holds dear to himself in order to try and protect these 2 men. He's willing to give up everything. Right? He's even standing out there, shuts the door behind him, putting himself in harm's way where he could easily be killed by these men. So he's putting his life on the line. He puts his own daughters on the line, which is probably his whole world, right? And it just kind of magnifies the character of Lot, that although maybe he's not the wisest guy, and he isn't the wisest guy in the world, he is still righteous. He still has a heart for God and trying to do the right thing. And he's desperate in this situation. This seems to be the only thing that he can try and do. It's immediately rejected by these men, which is, even more striking in the story that they would reject it like this, because, hey, like, why wouldn't you be okay with that? If that's what you're trying to satisfy. And of course, this just further shows the debauchery that these men are obsessed with claiming, what it is, their prize they have in mind, right? They feel entitled to this. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, pretty dark stuff. So let's see what happens next. Now, so far, the angels haven't done anything. They're kind of just standing back and letting the events unfold. And it's not till, Lot is willing to give up everything that we see them then do something, which is what we're about to read. But before we do that, I do want to point out one more thing. So Lot is willing to give up his own children to try and honor God. So this is not the only time we see something like this in the Bible. We're going to see it later with Abraham. He's going to be tested in a very similar way. And then we're also going to see with, God himself, right? The relationship between the Father and the Son, where the Father is willing to, basically sacrifice his own son for the sins of the whole world. And it's not just for strangers, right? Humans aren't strangers to God. He knows them very well. he does it to save his own enemies, right? He did that while we were technically enemies of God. So we see this theme of being willing to sacrifice everything in order to do the right thing. And that's really what Lot is doing right here. And it's a very unimaginable situation to find yourself in. But yeah, I personally don't see this as being bad on Lot's character or not valuing his daughters. I think that he clearly does value them. I think this just magnifies what he's willing to give up. So yeah, so let's go ahead and keep on here with the story. Of course, my page is flipped on me. So yeah, let's go ahead and go through 10 through 11. Let's see. Lot played all the cards he could. Let's see what happens next. All right. But the two angels reached out, pulled Lot into the house, and bolted the door. Then they blinded all the men, young and old, who were at the door of the house, so they gave up trying to get inside. And just say, like, angels are pretty powerful. That's pretty crazy. The angels were fully in control of the situation from the start. They were never really in any danger. Of course, Lot didn't know that. And so I think they've revealed now what they are. And yeah, they were able to blind everyone out there. And on top of that, they were basically, well, I think what we need to focus here is the men out there. The way the language seems to be written is that even though they were blinded, they were still trying to find the door. They were still trying to get into the house. And it took some time for them to finally give up, which is, once again, like, wow, these guys were really depraved. And this city, this culture in this city is completely lost. I mean, this is basically what we've described before as being, you know, full pre-flood. So if you want to kind of a zoom in picture of what the people were like before the flood, this is probably close to what we're looking at. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's like they're hardly even recognizable as human beings. They're acting like just pure animals. And so, you know, once again, it describes people before the flood as not having a single good thought or good thing in their heart. Like, it was completely lost to darkness. And of course, this is basically how Sodom and Gomorrah have eventually come to, and this is actually spread to the surrounding towns as well. So this is a pretty big problem. But the angels seem to have control of it for the moment, and we'll see what kind of happens next. So let's go ahead and go through 12 through 16 to keep moving through the story and see what we can get out of that. All right. Meanwhile, the angels questioned Lot. "Do you have any other relatives here in the city?" they asked. "Get them out of this place, your son-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone else, for we are about to destroy this city completely. The outcry against this place is so great it has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it." And keep going. "So Lot rushed out to tell his daughter's fiancés, 'Quick, get out of the city. The Lord is about to destroy it.' But the young men thought he was only joking." All right, we're going to stop right there. I don't think we read all the way through where I said we were going to. We stopped at 15. That's okay. So yeah, so what I think is very interesting about this part right here, obviously it's kind of comical that the son-in-law, so these two virgin daughters were betrothed to be married. They just weren't married yet. And their husbands-to-be just thought he was joking. They wouldn't take him seriously. And so, yeah, just kind of goes to the lack of seriousness about, you know, these types of things. You know, the people of the city just seem to not really care about God or anything about judgment. They won't take us seriously, which is probably why they're the way they are. And then on top of that, it says the angels say that, you know, the reason this is happening is because the outcry of all these innocent people have reached the Lord. And I think that's really interesting, just something to think about. The power of prayer itself, like that God is doing this because people cried out to him. It's not just that God knew there was some bad things going on and figured he should go and do something about it. That's not what's being described in the story. It's specifically in response to the prayer of people who have been victimized by the culture of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I would imagine with what they're doing, there was probably a lot of victims. And so God is intervening specifically because people called out to him. And I think that's really interesting to reveal about God's character. And I think it's why, Christianity talks about the power of prayer, that, when we pray, God responds to those prayers. And that sometimes God won't act in a situation simply because no one is praying to him about it. So that's kind of an interesting thing about the God of the Bible. So yeah, with that, let's go ahead and keep reading. I'm just going to read all the way through 22. Also, I remember that this time. There we go. All right, at dawn the next morning, the angels became insistent. Hurry, they said to Lot. Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here. Get out right now, or you will be swept away in the destruction of the city. When Lot still hesitated, the angels seized his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and rushed them to safety outside the city, for the Lord was merciful. When they were safely out of the city, one of the angels ordered, "Run for your lives and don't look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains or you will be swept away." "Oh no, my lord," Lot begged. You have been so gracious to me and saved my life, and you have shown such great kindness. But I cannot go to the mountains. Disaster would catch up to me there, and I would soon die. See, there is a small village nearby. Please let me go there instead. Don't you see how small it is? Then my life will be saved." "All right," the angel said. "I will grant your request. I will not destroy the little village. But hurry, escape to it, for I can do nothing until you arrive there." This explains why the village was known as Zoar, which means little place. Okay, so a few things happen there, kind of interesting. So Lot, he hesitates. Like, clearly he's attached to the city. He loves the city in one way, and is very grieved by the evil that is in it, of course, which is a very vexing situation, but he's not too keen on just abandoning his home and everything that he knows. So the angels have to literally grab him by the hand, and his wife and his daughter. So it seems like they're all hesitating at this point, and the angels have to basically run them out of the city. And another interesting thing is that Lot, he's the righteous guy in the situation. He says, I don't want to go up to the mountains, can at least go to this little town. And they were willing to grant his request, even though technically that little town would have also been consumed by the destruction. It gets spared simply because Lot made a request, which I do find that interesting as well, that these angels are willing to listen to a righteous man and what he's asking for, and granting small requests like that. So I thought that was interesting as well. But yeah, let's they're all getting out of there, and this also, it goes back to what God promised Abraham. Abraham was concerned Lot would be destroyed in the destruction, but God is being merciful. It even says that right here. When Lot hesitates, God could have just like, okay, you know what? Fine, that's it. And he would have been fully justified in leaving Lot there to perish with the city. But he said that he was merciful. And so he goes to great lengths to, basically get Lot to safety, despite Lot not helping himself in that situation. So, yeah, pretty interesting there. Let's go ahead and go to the next part here. We're going to go from 23 through 26. I think so. We've got, yeah. All right. Okay, so let's jump to this. Easy day. 23 through 26. Lot reached the village just as the sun was rising over the horizon. Then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah. He utterly destroyed them, along with all the other cities and villages in the plain, wiping out all the people and every little bit of vegetation. But Lot's wife looked back as she was falling behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Oof. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. So we have God destroying the city and really the whole valley with fire. The only thing that gets spared is this little town that Lot is staying in, and we see Lot's wife, she turns back. And so basically, the angels made a very specific warning: do not turn back. Meaning, don't try to go back for the city. Don't try to go back for anything at all. I know I basically yanked you out of there, but don't go back for anything. Don't turn away. It's gone. It's done. Don't have anything to do with it, right? Reject this place. And so his wife is unable to do that. She can't reject the city, the people that are in it. She loves them more than she wants to be saved from the destruction. And so she turns back. It's not just, she looked back out of curiosity. Her heart is basically hard against God and wants the city more. And so she gets, kind of the, she gets turned into basically a warning to people who turn back on God, even though God's trying to save them. And they choose the world over him, and so she gets turned into a pillar of salt. There are pillars of salt in those places of the world, which is pretty interesting. There's actually several different places where they think that they know where which one is Lot's wife, and so that's kind of a, if I ever went in there, and kind of got to see the place, there might be some interesting tourist stops for that, but I don't think anyone knows for sure that one of those pillars are in fact her. But so basically God does this, takes care of, punishes her and also all of Sodom. And so destroys it utterly and completely. Now, this seems fantastic. This seems like one of those stories in the Bible. It's like, surely this is a myth, right? Like, how could this be that you would have this utter destruction? And do we have anything in archaeology or history that could basically confirm that this thing happened? Now, this would have happened in what we call the Bronze Age. So this would be, Bronze Age was about the time that Abraham was alive. And interestingly, we do have, let's see here, let's get this guy up. There we go. So we have this gentleman right here. I want to make sure I don't get his name incorrect. So he's Dr. Stephen Collins. And this is a man who basically thinks he's found the exact location of Sodom and Gomorrah. So there was an old tradition believing that Sodom and Gomorrah was at the south end of the Black Sea. Just because it's an area that looks very devastated, and it's kind of believable that, hey, if God destroyed an area, then perhaps this is it. But there were no archaeological finds in that area, and it was also a marshland, not a place that you would build a really big city. Sodom and Gomorrah was a central hub for this area. It was a big deal, and there were several other large cities, but this was probably one of the biggest. And so it's where would the stuff, there should be a lot of archaeological record buried somewhere about this. And the interesting thing is that Stephen Collins went to Genesis 13 that specifically says the area of Sodom, and he started digging around there, and between two hills he found basically a destruction layer with some pretty interesting facts. So there was a meter deep of ash. Well, I should probably drink some water real quick. Hold up. There we go. Talking so much. So there's a destruction layer where there was a meter deep of ash on top of basically a ruined civilization that would have been dated back to the this time period in the location that Sodom would be at, and or Sodom and Gomorrah. And it's basically a big destroyed city by fire. And the interesting thing about it, it's not just like fire everywhere. It was all coming from a specific direction. So there was actually a layer of sand that had been turned to glass. And a regular fire or sacking of a city wouldn't turn sand into glass like that. As a matter of fact, it was very identical to the findings of after nuclear explosions, that when they nuke islands, and I think there's some places in Mexico with nuclear testing. And one of the interesting things that happens after nuclear fallout is that sand turns into glass on the ground because the heat flash is that intense. And the same finding is here in the destruction layer of this city found in the area that Sodom and Gomorrah would have been at. So it's actually a really pretty impressive archaeological find, which makes this story extremely reasonable that there was some kind of city blasted with heat. And another interesting thing about it is that there would be these, they would find these like half walls that would have, the fire damage on one side, glassing on one side of it, but not on the other. And they would find like pottery at the base of it that was unaffected by fire, and they would find other pottery further back that it would, was like glassed by fire. And so you would basically you had like the wall like this, and you would have a blast of heat in that angle. And so from right here to there wasn't any fire damage. And there was even one of a skeleton waist high behind the wall. The idea is that, or the best guess is that whatever this heat, whatever caused this heat, incinerated the top half of this person, and the bottom half remained. And of course, there's where the skeletal remains are still there. So some kind of fire blast from the sky destroyed a city about the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, and those archaeological finds have been discovered, which is pretty wild and crazy. Now, of course, the materialistic explanation, I would say, like the secular explanation for this, is to say, well, this was probably an ancient city that was destroyed by an asteroid. There isn't a big crater, so potentially an asteroid came down, broke up into maybe thousands of fiery pieces, and just destroyed the side of this valley. But maybe God used an asteroid to do what he did. But I mean, that would definitely create the heat and the force required for this destruction in this ancient city that was discovered by Stephen Collins. So if you want to learn more about it, definitely look this guy up. I saw a little bit of stuff on this. I definitely want to keep doing research on it. But it's interesting, the things that are being found. So I think that really takes this story out of the zone of just being a myth and gives it more credence of being something that, let's play devil's advocate. I think the best, if you want to argue against this being, God, raining fire down a city, at best you could probably say, well, coincidentally, an asteroid, broke up and fell all over this place, destroyed it with fire. Ancient people around there who survived would have told the story of God destroyed this place. It was God's wrath because it was an evil place. And then that story is what we get in the Bible. That's the best that you could say from a secular explanation. But to say that this was entirely made up, I think is not a very viable option, right? Now, personally, I think this adds to the validity of the Bible itself, because for the longest time, the not having a place, not having the archaeological discovery of Sodom and Gomorrah was used by opponents of the Bible to speak against it and say, look, the Bible's not true. These are just myth stories. So now that we have found archaeological evidence for a city destroyed by fire from the sky, I think that it's only fair to then say, okay, well, then that's evidence for the Bible at that point. So anyways, once again, it's a matter of how many of these stories can you validate. Turns out there's a lot of stories in the Bible you can validate through archaeology and things like this. So pretty interesting stuff. You believe what you want to believe, of course, but wanted to give you guys the information so you can make those decisions on your own. So let's see. I think there's a few messages here. Let's see. A new meaning to never look back. Heck yeah, it's true. And I got let's see here. Is that Earth water or Jupiter water? Let's see. Let's see. Oh yeah, always pretty. The research put in the episode. Heck yeah. Is that Earth water or Jupiter water? I'm not sure what that's a reference to. Okay. Well, anyways, so let's see here. Let's get. I was gonna say that you were drinking. Oh yeah. Well, it's definitely not Jupiter water. Yeah, no, and it's sealed, right? It's sealed, Wilson. So we should be good. But yeah, it's Jupiter water would be interesting. Wonder if I should try that. If it's pure H2O, it should just be fine, right? Let's go ahead and let's see. I want to make sure. Let's take this thing off. There we go. We don't need to see that anymore. Okay, so we only have a little bit more of the story to go. I would like to tell you that the story is going to now be PG. It's still a bit PG-13, even all this stuff has happened. You know what? Let's talk about this as well, because I think this is very important. The nature of God destroying this place. Now, I think I've tried to make it very clear the evil that is going on in this place, and yet there are still, I would say, opponents of this story who don't seem to understand it. and will accuse God of, say, genocide or being overly like eager to destroy and being wrathful and very, very hard. This story's brought up a lot when people say the Old Testament God is very mean while the New Testament God is very nice. And it's the reality is these people had a long time of warnings. We have several events earlier on in Genesis where they had Melchizedek to look to turn away from these things. They had their interactions with Abraham to look to see how he was with God, right? And so they had all these examples and all these warnings to change the way that they were running their lives, but they chose to continue to reject God and to invent and create their own reality, which is a delusion. So there's truth, right? That truth comes from God. This is the biblical worldview. The truth comes from God. And when you stray outside of that, you're straying away from reality itself. And so they chased after delusions and rejected God. And so they tried to basically run as far away from God as possible. And I think this is interesting comparison. You look at Lot. Lot is a man who's trying to basically live out how God created human beings to be, and that is to create them in his image, and that means his image of character, his likeness, his personality, basically to be good, to be holy, to actually protect the innocent, and basically do what Lot's trying to do in this story. So you have a man who's trying to live up to what God created us to be, and you have the men of Sodom who are literally trying to do the opposite of that. And they turn into basically these animals at this point. And it's not pretty, but how is God, like, how is he supposed to deal with, this when it happens? Now, God destroyed the entire area. So keep that in mind. He did that because the customs and this way of thinking in Sodom and Gomorrah was spreading to all the area around it. Another way of looking at this is if you have an apple and that apple is purely rotten on one side, are you going to cut it in half and eat the other half? The answer to that is no. You're going to take the apple and throw it away, because even though the other side of the apple might look good, the reality is the entire apple's infected with mold. And the sin is described in the very same way. Evil is described in the same way in the Bible, that it infects like a mold, that once it gets into something, you can't get rid of it. And, God gives people time and time again to turn away from their sins and this sort of thing. And there are stories in the Bible of people doing that. The Ninevites is a great example of that. It's going to be way later. But, these are people who were told that God was going to destroy them, and they repented, and God did not destroy them, right? And so we have a situation here where they didn't repent. They just got more and more into that evil. And had God not done something about it, had God not gotten rid of this culture, basically, it would have continued to spread and infect and create more and more victims and bring more people into this false reality that justify doing these types of evil things to people. So I think that's something that God was fully justified in doing. Remember, this is not genocide, this is judgment. And God can't do genocide anyways, let's be fair. God can't murder a person, because he has the right over someone's life. God takes human lives all the time. You could even argue that every human life, will eventually be taken by God, and God is not immoral for doing that. He is perfectly justified because of who he is, because he created that life. It's not okay for us to do that, but it is okay for him to do that. So just let's see here. Let's go. William, same God. Absolutely. He's a good father, a good parent. He shows us love, but he has to be stern and disciplined to correct us. And keep us safe, even if we don't like it. And that is absolutely true. He will do that. And for people who basically have given themselves over to darkness and they think that darkness in them is light, that verse we read in Matthew, how deep that darkness is. And obviously, these people were dangerous, not just to themselves. I mean, if God allowed this culture to continue on, then how many more generations of people would have been caught up in this evil and also destroyed by it? So yeah, God has to do something about it. It's like getting rid of a cancer. Once that cancer is spread to the whole body, it destroys the whole body. And what medical experts try to do is try to get that cancer and remove it completely before it can spread. And that's essentially what God's doing here. If God does nothing about these situations, then you get another pre-flood situation and God would have to destroy the whole world. And God has promised not to do that again, right? So he has to intervene. So yeah, so we've got this also foreshadowing of Canaan. We're getting a lot of foreshadowing of Canaan here. There's going to be an issue with Canaan later. There's going to be some destruction and God's judgment. And they're getting a warning here through Sodom and Gomorrah. Do they listen to that warning? We will find out. So yeah, let's go ahead and continue reading through the story. There is a little bit to go here. I'm just going to read it in two more chunks. We're going to go back to a scene with Abraham, and then we're going to read what happened with Lot and his two daughters. And unfortunately, the Lot and two daughters story still very PG-13. So with that, let's go ahead and continue on. Abraham got up early that morning and hurried out to the place where he had stood in the Lord's presence. He looked out across the plain towards Sodom and Gomorrah and watched as columns of smoke rose from the cities like smoke from a furnace. But God had listened to Abraham's request and kept Lot safe, removing him from the disaster that engulfed the cities of the plain. All right, there's not a lot to talk about here, but Abraham sees what's happened. You can see the aftermath of it. And not just Abraham, all the surrounding people here surely would have seen the destruction and, hopefully have seen this as a warning from God. Like, listen, do not, don't invent your own morality. Don't stray away from what is good, because that leads to a place of destruction. And God is very consistent with that, by the way, both in Old and New Testament, which is, now I think I know exactly what you're talking about, William, was the same God. Yes, Old, New Testament, 100% the same God in personality and temperament. So it takes a little bit closer reading than like I would say, not to speak down on it, but like a Sunday school style understanding of the Bible. When you really read these stories, you can understand the character God is being built here, who he is very consistent in the New Testament. So yeah, let's go ahead and we're going to go through this next part here. This next part is going to seem like, why are we even reading this? Why are we going over this? It's setting up the two people groups that are going to be important later in the story. So from Lot, there's going to be two big nations from his descendants. And these descendants are going to be, let's just say, a thorn in the side of the Israelites, the people of God. And there's going to be wars. There's going to be all kinds of issues that are going to happen a bit later in the story when we get to like Deuteronomy and Exodus and that sort of thing. So yeah, so this is kind of setting the stage here and how these people came about. There's also, well, we'll get to that when we get done reading it. So that's just kind of a prelude here, but it's going to involve some nasty stuff, just so you know. It is not pretty. So let's go ahead and read what happens with Lot and his two daughters. PG-13, everybody. Afterward, Lot left Zoar because he was afraid of the people there, and he went to live in a cave in the mountains with his two daughters. Can we just pause real quick? So he went to this town because he thought it was going to be better for him. He was afraid of the people there, meaning those people there were pretty much really bad, like the people of Sodom. Like the culture from Sodom had gotten even to this little town, and even these people were dangerous, right? So, and he has to leave it, right? He should have just listened to the angels to begin with, but the angels were very merciful to him and very gracious to him and giving him something he wasn't entitled to, which was to go to this little town and have it not be destroyed. So yeah, I just think that's interesting. Once again, Lot is a righteous man, but not a wise one. So let's continue from there. One day, the older daughter said to her sister, "There are no men left anywhere in this area, so we cannot get married like everyone else, and our father will soon be too old to have children. Come, let's get him drunk with wine, and then we will have sex with him. That way, we will preserve our family line through our father." So that night they got him drunk with wine, and the older daughter went in and had intercourse with her father. He was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. The next morning the older daughter said to her younger sister, I had intercourse with our father last night. Let's get him drunk with wine again tonight, and you go in and have intercourse with him as well. That way we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night they got him drunk with wine again, and the younger daughter went in and did the deed with him. As before, he was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. As a result, both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their own father. When the older daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Moab. He became the ancestor of the nation known as the Moabites. When the younger daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Ben-Ami. He became the ancestor to the nation now known as the Ammonites. What a crazy chapter, right? So the Moabites and the Ammonites are the two groups that you're going to want to remember, because those groups become important antagonists in the story later. And then there is a little bit, despite the gross nature of these people groups coming into existence, right? And despite the basically antagonistic relationship that they have with the people of Israel later, there is still good that comes from some of this. And one of that is that a Moabite woman named Ruth becomes a very important character in the story later on. As a matter of fact, it's a big story in the Bible, and she's a pretty awesome character and pretty awesome person in the story. And she comes from, this line, right? So anyways, it's really interesting how God uses people, very broken people, even people that come from something like this. So once again, further showing the character and nature of God and how graceful how gracious he is and merciful he is. That's graceful. Combining those two words means a different word entirely. But so it's God basically will judge evil. He will do something about it. There are plenty of people who complain that God doesn't do anything about evil, and then when he does something about evil, those same people will complain that, well, now God killed these people. That's not right either. And it's like, well, you're never going to win with those people. The reality is, it is God's responsibility to take care of evil and to make sure something like Sodom and Gomorrah doesn't spread, to answer those prayers, those cries of the victims of Sodom and Gomorrah, and to do something about that evil. And this is the way to deal with it. And it's messy, but it's reality as well. And the warning here, above anything else, is basically, the further we get away from God, the less human, the more animalistic, the more lost people get. And instead, these people should be pursuing God, chasing after God. And it's not going to make them perfect. Lot's not perfect. Abraham's not perfect. But yet God is able to use them in so many powerful ways because of the faith that they do have. With that, that's basically the chapter. Pretty crazy stuff. But we will continue on from there next week. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. We're gonna have a little bit of time to move back to the front end of the ship and get us back home. But we can continue that conversation there, and I think that's pretty much all I have. So let's go ahead, hit that transition, and head back up to Wilson. I was still speaking. Anyways, head back to the front of the ship. Okay, so yeah, let's see here. Let me make sure. Here we go. Yep, I think that'll do it. We'll end up somewhere. I'm pretty certain we'll end up somewhere in the Milky Way galaxy. Should be good. So Slay Wilson, nice. Let's see. Yikes, great job covering such a heavy chapter. It is a very heavy chapter. I appreciate that. Wanted to make sure I was, just explaining the story so we understood what it is that, is going on. And, yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. I do like this story. I think it's a good story for us to remember, and it's going to get brought up a lot throughout the Bible. So it's something that gets referred to a lot. It's a big event, right? Let's see here. I want to make sure. I think here we go. Nope. Well, that should be it. Let me make sure we. Oh well, that's weird. All right, so something happened there. All right, let me. Oh, you know what I did? All right, Wilson, don't make the back end of the ship look invisible, or the front end of the ship look invisible. Wilson. Okay, so let's. I think we're good here. I think we're good. We're not gonna fly away somewhere, are we, Wilson? Okay. All right. Well, with that, yeah. So I appreciate you guys checking the show out. Keep in mind, we are going to basically go through the entire story of the Bible, all the fun stories that people like, and some of the stories that people don't like, and some of the stories that are PG-13 or even rated R. And we're going to try and be as family friendly as possible with it. But that's the nature of the Bible. It gets real quick on a lot of things. So yeah, if you want to, share this with anybody else, I think that's one of the best ways for us to grow the channel, get this out to more people, getting people to just understand the Bible. Like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, I mean, how many people misunderstand that story? It seems like a lot of people do. They think it's, they try to use it as justification for certain current day political topics or different things like that. The story's a lot bigger than that sort of thing. It's really talking about the nature of God and how he will do something about evil. And how dark the human mind can get. This is not something that, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were not uniquely evil people, right? They are human beings, and we all have the ability to get consumed by these really dark things and then feel justified and like we're entitled to those evil things. And so if we don't check ourselves, if we don't actually look to truth, right, and pursue God, then we end up in those places, and that gets pretty scary, right? So part of making the world a better place is to self-reflect and work on our own hearts. And I think that's probably one of the best things we can get from this. But yeah, with that, I think that we're probably good. Let's go ahead, unless you guys have anything else, then we'll go ahead and jump into the outro here. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week, and I appreciate you stopping by.
I got lost at night, under the stars up in the sky. Directions hard to find, under the stars up in the sky. I got lost at night, under the stars up in the sky. Directions hard to find, under the stars up in the sky. I don't know where to take this, I don't wanna break this. We're living in the moment, living in the moment. Your head is on my shoulder, but never getting older. Baby, it's you and I. Yeah, we're stars in the sky. Oh, you and I. Yeah, we're stars in the sky. You see that you're leaving me, the same thing you said last night. You can't do it peacefully, you won't go without a fight. So when I go, I know you'll follow me. I don't want slamming doors, no, just wait and see. You'll feel it naturally, there's no one else I see. I know you'll follow me. I don't know where to take this, I don't wanna break this. We're living in the moment, living in the moment. Your head is on my shoulder, we're never getting older. Baby, it's you and I.